What's going on, everybody? Good morning, evening, afternoon, whatever it may be as you watch this video. Yes, I am back, but I'm not here to beat around the bush or give excuses or explain the deletion of all of my previous content, at least not initially. I'm just here to make up for lost time. December 20th, 2021, the initial release date of Deepwoken. Deepwoken has officially been released for 3.5 years. Needless to say, the game still has a player base, a dedicated one at that. I find myself coming back to this game more often than I even imagined. It was truly the first game that has genuinely transcended what I even thought to be possible on a platform like Roblox. It's a fairly safe statement, and I think a lot of people would agree with the sentiment that Deepwoken is something special. I was a kid when I first started playing this game. The first time it was even shown to me, I was blown away. But back then, Deepwoken was a much simpler game, nowhere near what it is now. Let me explain. If you aren't familiar with the rigorous testing that Deepwoken underwent, its strict NDA policy for all testers, and the hype that followed this game's developers around like a curse, then let me fill you in. Deepwoken was officially created by Monad Studios, a Roblox group that was initially comprised of two main lead developers. Monad initially found their success in a similar permadeath fantasy game called Rogue Lineage. If you ever played this game, you'd know that it was even more unforgiving, especially in its infancy, than Deepwoken currently is. Rogue Lineage was a purely community-driven game. It had a fairly simple concept. You find trinkets to sell to procure silver coins, and then use that silver to fund essentially your entire progression. You had 3 lives, which could only be restored with an artifact called a Phoenix Down, which in its early stages was a hard thing to get. Most people played in groups called houses, and it allowed people to pool their funds together for easier progression. What I'm trying to get at is that this game was very community driven, and that fact is what allowed the game to flourish the way it did. It created a large, tight-knit community that really cared about the game. It spawned fan artists, content creators such as myself, and inspired a very large influx of fantasy games on Roblox, a lot of them implementing features and systems seen in Rogue. Rogue was undoubtedly one of the most influential games on Roblox at its time. So fast forward a bit, somewhere like late 2019, Deepwoken is no more than a twinkle in Raguzer's eyes. Rogue Lineage at this point was growing stale for a lot of people. There was a major update a while back at this point that came out rushed, then it had to get revamped. It was called K, and I think that update is what started to sour opinions on the game in general. I remember a lot of fatigue with the game overall, and as much as people were still addicted, I think a lot of people left or started to leave Rogue Lineage around this time. So suddenly, out of nowhere, Rag drops a major post in the Rogue Lineage Discord announcing Monad's next project, Drowned Gods. It was a new permadeath RPG game that had its own soundtrack, and there really wasn't much else to say about it than that. There was a minor private testing phase among some of the major content creators in the community, including myself, Itagaki, Rievolu, Infernasu, and a few others that were already a part of the community or just in the developers friend group. Monad, first and foremost, let community drive their game, taking feedback from many trusted testers, and that feedback led to changes that still play a huge role in the game today. But this testing phase was kept so far under wraps that I doubt anyone even really knew it was happening. There was the odd person that found screenshots of the group and the game and people in it, but nobody really knew anything about the game or what was going on with it. This game was more or less a mystery to the community. You might be curious about what the game was like at that time, and a lot of people ask about it, but I don't think anyone's really talked about it in detail, so I'm gonna do it. During this time, there was certainly a scrappiness to it. You sort of felt like a castaway on a desert island fighting for survival. People kept to their groups to try to explore, find new things, and more than anything, gatekeep everything. But the thing about this is that it's in private testing. There's not really any resources anywhere. Like, you can't go look up a fucking tutorial video or find some guide or something anywhere. It was just, you had to find it out for yourself. During this time, I think Deepwoken was far closer to Rogue Lineage than what it is now, albeit with a much cleaner world, design, and way more interesting systems. From what the devs were saying, this project had a pretty huge scope, and they were pretty open about their ideas to testers. I remember a lot of voice chats where there would be like 20 to 30 people in the server just talking and chatting, playing the game, asking questions, and overall just hanging out with the community. This was probably the purest memories of this game that I had. I'd be lying if I said I didn't miss these days very dearly. The people that I met in the community and the way that the developers seemed so passionate and invested in the opinions of their players left me with a fondness for the game that I did not even think was possible for a Roblox game. I may be very biased towards this game because of my personal experience and because the community and developers were very good to me during these times. Despite this bias, I truly feel like there is really nothing else like this game, not just on Roblox, but anywhere. And the people in the community, short of controversy that I refuse to cover in this video, genuinely shaped the kind of person that I am today. I don't know where I'd be without this experience, but I'm gonna move on. The development of Deepwoken took a very long time. I want to say that Deepwoken before release underwent more overhauls and revamps of the game's systems than I can even count or remember. Initially, the game all took place in one server, meaning a player that was in the depths could still be in the same server as someone in the overworld. It was a system that worked, although it didn't come without its errors, so eventually they decided to split the game up into 2 instances. With that change also came an overhaul of the depths itself, which included the map that is actually still used for the first layer, Syphosia, I don't fucking know, today. After that came overworld changes, and a few months later, an overhaul of the game's progression. Before, you assigned your attribute points into your stats just like a traditional pen and paper RPG, which allowed you to learn talents once you met the requirement for that talent. Mantras weren't actually unlocked by leveling, they were crafted using ingredients called cores, sparks, and modifiers. They traded all of these systems out in favor of the training gear system, which now required the player to gain experience with the specific stat they were trying to upgrade in order to increase their attributes. This was the first major course correction that helped shape Deepwoken into what it is today. It added a degree of randomness to progression, turning it into a roguelike kind of experience. But you know, nowadays the progression is a lot less random. Even still, despite more recent changes that remove a lot of the randomness from the game, these systems are more or less the same as they were in testing as they are now. They did a lot during this time to streamline the game's progression and make it more digestible as opposed to hardcore and unforgiving. I think these changes did a lot for Deepwoken's overall health as a long-standing game, as like I said, this game was a lot more close to Rogue Lineage before these changes, and the game was never meant to be Rogue Lineage 2 or a successor to that game in the slightest. The only thing that the games really have in common now is permadeath and fantasy. So fast forward a bit, and by a little bit I mean less than a year. After a lot of testing and changes, the game was finally going to release to the public. I think genuinely that Deepwoken on release was the best state the game had been in. I had a lot of appreciation for how quickly they managed to get this game into a playable state despite the scope of the game and the features they wanted to include. And of course, at this time, the community began to soar. New content creators, more feedback, fan art, fan fiction. Yeah, fan fiction, dude. I'm gonna just say you don't want to go down that path. I'm gonna just leave it there. You do not want to go down that path. Anyway, my point is people were falling in love with Deepwoken. The player base reached an all-time high after a few months with rigorous hard work from the developers to bring content updates, balance changes, and as usual, Monad was incredibly diligent in trying to incorporate community feedback in order to improve the game, and it worked. Content creators advocated for changes, gave ideas, and Monad listened. The game received a steady flow of updates after release. The team ended up growing, more developers were being hired on, more contributors, more people became involved with turning Deepwoken into what it is today, and this would eventually lead to Deepwoken's first major update after release. Verse 2. Verse 2 is possibly one of the most controversial updates to the game, and though there were sour opinions about changes because nobody likes change, the game was peaking in terms of player count at this time. They changed the combat, adding a burst mechanic similar to that of Guilty Gear or BlazBlue, and it actually did a lot for the pacing of the combat. Before this update, your mana, or ether, drew from a second bar called Reservoir, which could be restored by eating spell ingredient. After the update, Reservoir was essentially banished from the history of the game and replaced entirely with Tempo, which essentially acted like a combo meter. The more damage you were doing or taking, your tempo would increase, which also increased the regeneration of your ether. It promoted aggressive play in PvP and also made PvE a lot less of a drag. Before this update, using your skills or mantras was a punishing factor. If you spent your ether fighting mobs or players, the only way to get it to regen again was to eat a fucking spark gland or something, which is why I still don't understand why this change received so much backlash. I guess people were scared that the hardcore and survival mechanics in Deepwoken were going to die out in favor of making the game more fast-paced and flashy, and yes, that was technically the effect, but I don't really think it harmed the game's identity all that much. In fact, I think PvP was possibly in the healthiest state it had ever been in. Some of you guys could probably pull up some video of some just brain-dead combo one-shotting somebody completely, but I don't know. I feel like there's still a lot more counterplay and mechanical skill that goes into Deepwoken compared to other PvP RPGs, and I think that's an accomplishment. There's a reason that most games don't really try too hard to lean into both PvE and PvP and settle for one or the other. That is a very difficult balance to strike. Overall, I think Deepwoken might be one of the coolest fantasy RPG games ever made for that fact alone. I mean, these guys took elements from the Soul series, 2D fighting games, hardcore medieval combat games like Chivalry and Mordhau, and then they smashed it all together to create a somewhat fairly balanced and rewarding combat system that has a reasonably high skill ceiling. And as the game spread its wings and started to grow into these changes, on came more balance adjustments, content updates, and not to mention one of the coolest dungeons I've ever seen in an RPG in general, Layer 2. And I'm not just saying that because I did the funny chaser laugh, okay? You pipe down. Take your hands off the keyboard. The fuck am I saying, bro? All right. My point is just that when you actually boil it down, all of the major updates and changes that Deepwoken has been getting since release are very, very good changes. And I think today, Deepwoken is probably one of the most accessible, unique, and engaging experiences that you can find on Roblox or in general. The progression is reasonable. The PvE is fun and offers actual challenge, even to experienced players, especially if you consider a lot of the world bosses in the new depths trial. The PvP is rewarding and also very easily accessible for new players. Thank God they removed the chime skulls. And there's plenty of exploration to do, especially if you're a new player. I can only imagine being the person who has never heard of this game, tries it on a whim, and gets a chance to explore all of the locations, systems, characters, creatures, builds, and whatever else they could find. I know I sound like a fucking nerd right now, but what I'm trying to say here is that there is so much work that went into this game, so many developments over the long term, so much passion and dedication poured into it, not only by the developers, but the community and its players, that really gets taken for granted. I don't think the average player realizes just how impressive Deepwoken is, not just as a game, but as an accomplishment. So overall, do I sound like a nerd right now talking about this game? Absolutely. This game is very special to me, hence the reason I made this long video. I think the fact alone that currently in 2025 I am still making a video on this game says enough, and that's honestly a perfect segue to get into the thing that I've been putting off to the end of this video to actually fully talk about. Yeah, I had quit this community completely. I closed this channel, deleted all of the videos on my channel, and I'm gonna explain why, so buckle in. This is going to get a little bit personal. The way that I was invited into this community was making a 10-minute rant video, shit talking the developers back when I was, I want to say I was like 15 or 16. I was a kid. First of all, I've said a lot that the developers of this game have given me a lot. They let me do their Q&A in the first place way back when, which is just a memory now because during my crash out, I deleted this too. So sorry about that. I know that I might probably have been a bit of a disappointment. If you aren't aware, for those of you watching this video, I was actually one of the first people to have the opportunity to use my small platform to present this game in the Q&A that they let me host with them. It was very fun, and it's probably thanks to them that I actually ever had any kind of following, and what you see now is the result. I definitely crashed and burned. I'm sorry. I have said it a concerning number of times, but I am eternally grateful for the opportunities I was given by you guys, and the way you guys helped me along. As far as I was concerned back then, I was nobody. I was growing up in a difficult household, and avoiding specifics, I was possibly in the worst mental state of my entire life when you guys basically pulled me in, let me play your game early, let me test it, make friends in your community, host Q&As publicly for the entire community, presenting your passion project in this way, and letting me have a part in that in any way. It gave me a sense of self-importance that I never really had before. I felt like this channel and Deepwoken was my chance to capture the image I had in my head for myself, not just as a YouTuber, you know, making videos, but as a person. But overall, a lot of factors, including the stress of my environment, the stress of my own psyche, and my poor self-image. First and foremost, I am sorry. It might not seem like that big of a deal to some people that I deleted all of my Roblox videos. It might not even seem like that big of a deal to the developers themselves, but I still want to apologize because I feel about it personally pretty strongly. And to those of you people who are still watching, and especially those of you who found my new channel and left comments there asking about where me and my videos were, and also to my friends, I was a deeply insecure, troubled person, and it was very hard not to let every little thing get to me. But I think it's safe to say I am doing better now, mentally. But finally, I do want to thank you all for watching this video, for engaging with me and my silly little videos where I get a little too emotional about video games, and allowing me to be a part of this community. It's something I could never forget, no matter how hard I tried. I hope you enjoyed. Please like and subscribe. Also, feels a little wrong to plug after that fucking speech, but if you care enough, go check out my new channel if you care about that. And thank you for finding this video. I doubt the algorithm will even pick this shit up, I won't lie, especially now in 2025. But you know, I felt the need to make this video. I feel like I abandoned this channel a little too easily, so yeah. Anyway, that's it. Peace.